Well, g'day, Rod. Welcome to The Real Look. Where does today's podcast find you?
Where does today's podcast find me? Well, I'm in Sarasota, Florida, which I absolutely love. I could be a poster child for the Chamber of Commerce here because I'm in shorts and a T-shirt, which I normally am. So, yeah. How about you? Where are you located?
Well, we're located in the Northwest, although today I'm coming in from Austin, Texas. I'm at the headquarters of Keller Williams International.
Gotcha.
But hey, Rod, we all have a journey. We all have a story. And you got into real estate very young. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay. Well, so I'm an immigrant. I'm going to take you way back because it'll kind of lend some framework to what we were talking about here. So I'm a Dutch immigrant, was born in the Netherlands, wooden shoes and windmills, and immigrated when I was 6 years old with my brother Albert, my mother's Vantje. We ended up in Denver, Colorado. And we didn't have much. I'm going to tell you, I remember we shopped at an expired food store, true story. They had them back then. We drank powdered milk with our cereal in the morning because it was cheaper than real milk. And trust me, it sounds better than it is. And, I wore clothes from the Goodwill and the Salvation Army all the way through junior high school until when I was 14, I finally got disgusted and lied about my age because I was tall at Burger King and got a job flipping burgers so I could buy my own clothes and ultimately buy a car. But, you may have listeners, agents that have had it tougher than I did, or maybe even now, things are slowing down. I know it's going to be a little tougher in this season that we're in right now, especially for your environment. But, back then I knew I wanted more. And luckily my mom had an incredible work ethic. So she babysat kids so we'd have enough money to eat. And we always had a house full of kids. But she was also a bit of an entrepreneur with no formal education. She invested in the stock market and IPOs successfully. And she also invested in real estate. Her first real estate acquisition was the house right across the street from us. She bought when I was about 14 for about $30,000. And then when I was 17, she told me she'd made $20,000 in her sleep and that had gone up in value that much. And I was like, what? You made 20? This is when 20,000 was a lot of money. This is 1977. Okay. And I said, you made 20,000. You didn't do anything? Screw college. I'm getting into real estate. So I went out and got my real estate broker's license right when I turned 18. I was mentioning this to you guys before we started recording. You could actually do that, become a broker just through education back then. Now they're smarter and they realize you need some experience before you can have your own office. But I was a broker, and so I still living at home, and I'm smart enough to go work for another broker, obviously, but I was still living at home. And my first year in real estate, I made about $8,000. My second year, maybe $10,000. But my third year, I made over $100,000, which back in 1980 was pretty decent change. So what happened between year 2 and year 3 that caused me to 10x my income? Well, what happened was I met a guy, I was actually dating his daughter, that taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology and how really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is your mindset and psychology. Only 10 to 20% is the mechanical stuff we talk about on our podcast here. It's the do and it's the keep doing, right? And, fast forward to today, I've owned over 2,000 houses that I've rented long-term. I own thousands of apartment buildings. In 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And you might say, wow. And Rod said, wow. And I thought I was a freaking real estate god. I thought I could do no wrong. My head got so big, I could barely fit it through a door. And when that happens, sometimes the real God or the universe, whatever you believe, will give you a nice little smack. Well, that was 2008. I lost everything in 2008, and I lost $50 million conservatively. And so, what I'm known for talking about on my podcast and at my boot camps is really the mindset it took to have 50 million to lose in the first place, but maybe definitely as important, maybe more importantly, is the mindset it took to recover from that.
Well, that's awesome, Rod. What I'd really like to understand is, as you got in as a broker at a very young age and had some pretty quick success, particularly in the third year, as you mentioned, at what point in your journey of being a real estate broker or agent did you really catch the bug for investing, which was the reason kind of you'd gotten in the first place?
Yeah, no, it was about that third or fourth year. And I met a guy and what we were doing, by the way, that caused me to 10x my income was I was actually knocking on the doors of people that were in foreclosure and saying, hey, I'm Rod Khleif. Saw you having some trouble with Countrywide Funding or whoever it was back then. And, I help people and I would list houses. I mean, sometimes I'd have 3 or 4 listings a day and I would also buy houses. And so initially it was just listings. I was too scared to actually buy a place. But by the time I was 20, third year, actually, I bought my house that third year too. I bought my first $18,000 piece of crap with cat smell in the basement or in the crawl space and everything else. But yeah, so it happened back then. That's when I started, and this was in Denver. And I ended up buying 500 houses in Denver. Gosh, I wish I still had those. Whew. They'd be free and clear. I'd be netting about $1 million a month. Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Anyway, but yeah.
So the mindset then, Rod, as you mentioned, right, there's a mindset around, okay, how did you go do that through 2006 to 2008? I mean, what's the mindset behind that? And even more importantly, right, we're in a market now where, the number of units has dropped about 30% from where it was a year ago. And by the way, that's getting into the territory of what happened in 06 to 08.
Oh, I know.
Right. So the mindset that you had to develop to pick yourself up, because I mean, $50 million, sorry. That's
I thought I was set for life. I mean, listen, people jumped off buildings and killed themselves for losing less proportionally in the Great Depression and in 08 and 09. Unfortunately, people, ended it. And so I'll tell you, let's go into some of the strategy, because this is really important in what we're facing, because there's going to be fear. There's going to be fear in the agent and broker environment for sure, because deals are going to slow down. And, so the first thing that I did was reassociate with my goals, what I wanted and why I wanted it, because how do you get anything if you don't know what it is? And if someone comes to one of my boot camps, the first hour and a half is what I call goal setting on steroids, because again, you've got to know what it is you want with clarity, and you've got to know why you want it, because you've got to be able to push through what you've got to create what Napoleon Hill in his book Think and Grow Rich calls a burning desire. You've got to create that burning desire, or reignite that burning desire, as it were. And so goals do that. And you need that burning desire to push through fear, to push through limiting beliefs, or maybe you're comfortable. The comfort zone's a nice warm place, and we also know nothing grows there, right? And so you've got to have that burning desire to push through that. And so, like I said, that's the first thing you do. And let me mention this. I do a really nice goal setting workshop every year at on New Year's Day. And I did one again this year. And if you go to rodslinks.com, it's at the bottom. There's a guide you can download. And I'm not going to try to sell you anything. You just take this. It's music. It's professionally narrated. I do it in my studio here. And I'm really proud of it. And why is that important? You should do your goals, especially if you're in sales, guys. And you all, any of you listening or watching are in sales, you've got to do your goals at least 2 or 3 times a year minimum, okay? And reassociate with them to stay juiced and to deal with the negativity and the rejection and all that stuff that we all deal with in that business. And so, again, rodslinks.com, it's at the bottom. Here's the sad reality. People spend more time planning a freaking birthday party than they do designing their lives. That's designing your life. And if you're listening, and have your spouse do it. If you've got a child that's over 10 years old, have them do it. My God, get them off on the right foot. So again, please take advantage of that. And if you come to one of my boot camps, you don't have to, because I do it there. But anyway, so it starts with the goals. You've got to know what you want. And then, I mentioned limiting beliefs, to push through limiting beliefs, you need that, because a lot of people have them. And I'll give you an example of a limiting belief. So when I immigrated, I didn't speak English, and I got thrown into school. Found out what bullies were for the first time. So I got my butt kicked occasionally. And then my mom, proud Dutch woman that she is, thought it'd be a great idea to send me to school in wooden shoes and those leather shorts the Germans wear for Oktoberfest, the lederhosen. So I got my butt kicked again. And then, we had bullies at the end of my street, and they'd chase me home, and she'd chase them off with a fly swatter. Next day, Rod got his butt kicked again. And so, I came up with this belief that I wasn't good enough. And a lot of people have these limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not analytical enough. That was another one of mine. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. And there's a reason the acronym for belief systems is BS, because they are BS, but you've got to deal with them. And so, that the goal setting really helps with that, and to push through that stuff. And then the next piece really is, and here's the other thing, actually, before I get into that. We're heading into some pain. We're heading into fear. I mean, don't get me started on, the news. My God, you don't even know what to believe anymore. I don't care which side of the aisle you're on. It's all crap that they put out there. People forget that they're a for-profit business, and, there's so little credibility anymore in the mainstream news. And because if you're listening or watching, you're a leader. And right now, more than ever, the world needs leaders. And so, you know, it's super important that you pay attention to what you focus on. You know, if you get caught, because whatever you focus on is going to get larger, both positive or negative, right? And if you're focused on the news and all that crap online, you know, you're gonna get fearful and again, fear paralyzes. So really, I would just caution you to stand guard at the door to your mind. Bring in the good stuff. On my podcast, I do these clips every week called Own Your Power. They're motivational. You know, try those out. They're fantastic. I'm really proud of them. You give me 5 minutes a week, I'll juice you. And my podcast is called Lifetime Cash Flow through Real Estate Investing. But even if you don't use me, go to YouTube. You know, go on, watch decent videos. Don't get stuck in the news, because, and this is why the goals are so important, because through this next couple of years, when it gets really rough in your business, in our business, the real estate business, you know, it's the goals that are going to pull you through. And again, if you bring in the negativity, you're going to get paralyzed by fear. And so right now, more than ever, those goals are super important. And what you focus on is super important. So like I said, just be really careful what you're looking at and bringing in. And I could keep going, but I don't want to keep.
What did you do specifically, Rod, when you lost 50 million?
Okay.
What did you do to pick yourself up?
Yep. So it started with the goals. Okay. It started with the goals, because I had to get real clear on what I wanted again. But then I had to make a decision. You know, which direction am I going to go? What am I going to do? And when I say decision, I'm not talking about dipping my toe in the water. I'm not talking about 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I mean, it is done when I make that decision. In fact, the Latin root for the word decision means to cut off. So a great example of a decision would be, if you're going to attack the island, you burn your ships because you're taking their darn ships home. Okay, that's a decision. It's done. And so it starts with that. And this applies to anybody listening as well. You know, if I'm going to encourage you, by the way, if you're an agent or a broker, for God's sake, start investing in yourself and buying some assets. You guys are in the perfect position to take advantage of these opportunities that are coming, because everything's going on sale. And the biggest money is made in what's coming as far as investments, okay? And you know, as an agent or broker, you're only as good as your last sale. But if you buy assets that provide cash flow, at some point you don't have to worry about those sales anymore. So just throw that out there. But you make that decision, and that's what I did. I made a decision. I did what direction I was going to go, and then you have to take that first step towards that decision. And you know, that can sometimes be the biggest step of your life. You know, Dr. Martin Luther King said, "You take that first step in faith, the next step will be revealed." You know, Lao Tzu, thousands of years ago, said, "The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step." But you got to take it. You've got to basically, you have to take action. You've got to make a move. So decision, take action. And then, you know, what I tell people, my students that, you know, buy multifamily properties is to play to your strengths. You know, a lot of people feel like they need to develop their weaknesses, but your strengths are your greatest assets. And here's what I mean by this. Like, if you're buying apartment buildings, there's lots of different hats you can wear. You can be the person that finds the deals. You can be the person that builds relationships with investors, brokers, so on and so forth. So you're the outgoing person. As you can imagine, that's me in my relationships with, you know, we own thousands of apartment units, and that I play that role. But maybe you're analytical. You play a role in the underwriting, or maybe you're really process driven. You're good with management. You could do asset management after you buy an asset. So there's a lot of different hats you can wear in our business. But you want to play to your strengths, because first of all, if you're playing in your strengths, and that's what I focused on, by the way, back then. I focused on working on my strengths, which was communication. I'm a great communicator. So I started the podcast, and, you know, we just broke 16 million downloads. And, you know, you know, I focused on my strengths. But let me add a couple more tips to that. You know, when you're playing in your strengths, you love what you do. Work is play. You never work another day in your life, right? You're in the zone. You're in the quan, like Jerry Maguire. I mean, you love what you're doing, and you're passionate. And I'm going to tell you, to influence people, you need passion. If you're loving what you're doing, you bring that passion to the game, you're going to influence people. People want to be around people that they can feel that passion from. So playing to your strengths. So that was the next thing. And then there were two other things. One, I told you about focus. Focus is, you know, the most wealthy and successful people on the planet have the highest degree of focus. And so, you know, it's really important to pay attention to what you focus on, and hone your focus. You know, and so what do I mean by that? So I listened to two podcasts. I listened to Tim Ferriss, and I listen to Joe Rogan. So I get both sides of the aisle, okay? And I try to stay as balanced as I can. Well, on Tim Ferriss, he interviews the best of the best in different walks of life, the best athletes, Michael Phelps, NBA, NFL players, best actors, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jamie Foxx, Ed Norton, Hugh Jackman, billionaires like Ray Dalio, CEOs of the biggest companies in the world, Zuckerberg, examples. And he deconstructs that success. That's what he does. In fact, he's in Austin, by the way, now that I think about it. In fact, I think both of them are actually, Joe and Tim. But anyway, so, and I get excited about my 16 million downloads. They get that a week on both their shows. But anyway, but I started to hear a pattern on Tim Ferriss's show. These people he's interviewing, they almost all meditate. What does meditation enhance? Focus, right? So I just thought that was fascinating. But so focus is, and then one more piece, peer group. You show me your 2 or 3 best friends, I'll show you who you are in every aspect of your life, your health, your relationships, your happiness, and certainly your finances. And so, most people default to a peer group that they went to school with or they worked with. And sometimes that peer group doesn't have your best interests at heart, maybe out of their fear of feeling less than, fear of rejection, fear of showing, being shown up, or just their own limiting beliefs. They can hold you back. And sometimes it's family. And so I'll tell you, love your family, but choose your peers. When I was losing everything in 08 and 09, I was in Tony Robbins' Platinum Partnership. And it was about 130,000 for that mastermind back then. And now it's more than that. But I was around people that were thriving in the crash. Okay, they were killing it in 2008 and 9. They're like 50 million schmillion. Get up, you puss. Go make something happen. So is that who you want to be around when the going gets tough, right? Of course you do. You want to be around people that are going to build you up and validate you and empower you and motivate you and push you. And so that was really instrumental as well, being in that peer group. But anyway, I could keep going. But those are some of the major steps.
That's awesome. Rod, what is it about multifamily as an asset class that you particularly love? And was that
that's easy.
Is that where you kind of started, or how did
No. See, when I lost
that?
everything, when I lost everything in 2008, I had 800 houses along the Gulf Coast of Florida here, and I had several apartment complexes. It was the houses that pulled me down. Okay, which is why I started my podcast, was to tell people, if you're going to buy and hold, for God's sakes, do multifamily, don't do single family. True story. This is why I started the podcast. In fact, that was the main reason I started it. I used to tell people, I'll never sell you anything. I just want to add value and tell you my story. Now I'm a liar because I sell everything, coaching and books. But anyway, so the reason I crashed and burned, because I get asked this all the time. By the way, guys, I was at a 30% loan to value in 2006. Okay. And into 2006, that's all I owed was 30 cents on the dollar. And I still crashed and burned. Here's why. So first of all, Florida has no state income tax. So property taxes are higher. They have to make up that revenue somewhere. Also, I had properties in wind and flood zones, so higher insurance. So both those things impact cash flow, right? Those are big expenses. But what really killed me was these were C-class houses, these 800 houses, and they were 2 hours one way, 2 hours the other way, and everywhere in between, all along the coast here. So so C-class houses have a lot more maintenance, right? They're older, tougher demographic, right? And so a lot of maintenance. And if I sent someone to one of my apartment complexes, everything's the same. Plumbing parts, appliance parts, HVAC parts, locks, windows, all that's the same. So you can stockpile parts and they're in and out in an hour. Well, if I had to send someone to one of my 800 houses and it's an hour or more one way, then they have to go see what's wrong. Every house is different. Go find a Home Depot or a Lowe's where we have an account. And, what took an hour at one of my apartment complexes took all day at one of my 800 houses. So that killed the cash flow, killed it. But then the coup de grace was, back then I didn't pay attention to tenant demographics either. I mean, if they had a good credit, had a job, paid a deposit, I let them rent. Well, what I discovered after the fact was I had a lot of contractors, plumbers, electricians, drywallers, painters, roofers, which fell off a cliff in 2008 and 9. They didn't have work. And so it just imploded. But anyway, long answer to your question. But why do I like multifamily? Because my multifamily did just fine through that. It pulled back, but it could have easily survived. Of course, Rod, in his infinite wisdom, thought it'd be a great idea to cross-collateralize packages of houses with my apartment complexes to save 0.5% interest, stupid. But anyway, so I lost those too. But they did just fine. And I'm going to tell you why is multifamily a fantastic asset class? Well, I can tell you when COVID hit, Retail didn't get money. Office didn't get money. Industrial didn't get money. Self-storage didn't get money. We got money. We got hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent relief because people have to have a place to live. Hundreds of thousands. We just in my portfolio alone. So that's one reason. Second thing is multifamily is incredibly resilient. Rents exceeded pre-crash levels within 3 years of the 08-09 crash. They exceeded the pre-crash levels. It's a very solid asset class, and which is why it's so popular right now, obviously. But multifamily is just, I love it. Love it.
So Rod, I think a limiting belief that a lot of realtors would have is it's going to cost me too much to get to play that game. Right.
Okay.
I mean, single family.
Let me address that one. Let me address that one. So first of all, sure, you've got to learn the business. Okay. Absolutely. I've got a boot camp May 6th and 7th. It's virtual. I don't sell anything there. And I'll give your peeps a code. They can come for $47. Okay. And I don't sell anything there. So 16, 18 hours of training, nothing being sold for $47. If you can't afford $47, you're in the wrong place. But my boot camps are drinking through a fire hose. And like I said, it's $47 and I don't sell anything there. So, again, kind of a no-brainer if somebody wants to learn the business, but it starts there because they're fearful. In answer to your question, realtors are fearful because they don't understand the business. Because what you're going to find out, Bruce, is, these multifamily deals take money, but it doesn't have to be your own money. There's a lot of money that's getting killed in the stock market or even the bond market right now that would love to have a stable, secure return secured by real estate with the possibility of a nice hit at the end when it's sold or refinanced. So, I can tell you, don't tell anybody, but these last 4,000 doors I bought, I don't have a dime in. Okay, I don't. So I'm just kidding about not telling anybody. But the point is, I have students. Something I'm super proud of. My students, my coaching, now these are coaching students, not the boot camps, but the coaching students that I have own up somewhere in the 150 to 160,000 unit range. And I've only been teaching 5 years. Okay. And most of them, many of them buy these things with very little of their own money, if any of their own money. They raise the money, and so those, if you're listening to this thing, you're wondering how you can buy apartment complexes. You can even raise what's called the at-risk capital, which is the earnest money and the upfront cost to put a deal together. And I teach you all this. Real Look will be the code with 2 L's then. Real Look, and that will apply. Now, that won't apply to if I do a live event. You can't come for 47 to that. But you can come to the virtual. If I do a virtual one, you can come for that. But it starts with educating yourself, realizing that, like anything, you just need to understand it and learn it. And then you got to take massive action. And I'm about that. As you can tell, I'm about mindset and motivation. And that's the reason my students are so successful. And if you come to if they come to one of my boot camps, they'll see I spend a lot of time on that because, otherwise it's just entertainment if you don't take action with what you learn. And most people don't unless they're really pushed like I push them to take action. So.
What were some of the other mistakes that you learned? You mentioned cross-collateralizing your houses and your apartment complex.
Yeah.
What are some of the other things that you learned?
Not paying attention to tenant demographics was another one, right? I talked about that one. I'm going to tell you, I bought a 296 unit asset in San Antonio, and I literally looked where every single tenant worked to gauge recession resistance. Another 145 unit we just bought in Nashville, looked where every tenant worked to gauge recession resistance. So demographics. What else? Lessons learned. Oh my God, there's so many lessons, but I'm thinking real big ones is what's in my head. But I will tell you some of the common mistakes that I see newbies make, not raising enough money for I'm going to tell you, actually, let's talk about this. Here's one of the reasons I think there's going to be some serious pain over the next couple of years in my world, because a lot of operators that bought properties use bridge debt. Now, if you don't know what bridge debt is like the hard money lender in the commercial space. Okay. That's bridge debt. It's adjustable rate. It's short term. And there's $430 billion worth of multifamily loans coming due in 23 and 24, 430 billion. Okay. Now, here's why that's a big deal, because and year over year sales are down 74%. I just did a Facebook Live on this, so I know these percentages. In fact, I got them right here. And so 74% year over year. And so you you think about that, rates have gone up. Okay. So they either have to sell or refinance, right? And that could be a real challenge for these people. So I think there's going to be some incredible opportunity to snap up deals. So there's that. And then, not to scare the hell out of your listeners here, but here's another headline from 2 days ago. Recession fears rise. More than half of Americans say they'd lose everything. And I'll give you one more, which is really alarming in my opinion. Consumers are using credit cards to fight inflation. Is that a recipe for disaster? So again, is it a time to get scared? No. If you're a broker or an agent, pivot right now and think about buying real estate instead of selling it. Seriously. I mean, certainly keep the income coming in if you can get listings, but they're going to slow down, and there's no question it's going to slow down if it hasn't in whatever market you're in. There's just no question. And so, perfect opportunity to use your skill set and your connections and your resources. I mean, no, there's nobody better positioned to find deals than you. Okay, so use it to find deals. Learn the business. If it's multifamily, get your butt to my boot camp or start listening to my podcast. If it's another asset class, there'll be deals in every asset class for sure. I wouldn't do office for sure. Don't do office, but any other asset class but office. And of course, there's going to be opportunities to buy businesses as well. My God, there's 80 million baby boomers that are retiring and they have businesses to sell and they're not going to be able to sell them. And so it's going to be just a lot of opportunity. So again, don't be fearful. Get excited. That's what I'm going to tell you. And that's why your goals are so important. So you don't get sucked into the fear. So you're focused on what you want and you work towards that. Super important, especially in what's coming.
So Rod, you've taken some of this mindset and philosophy and goals, et cetera, and you've put it to use in the philanthropic world. Tell us a little bit about what you're involved in.
Oh, that's kind of you to ask me about that. Yeah. So I'll tell you a story. So I when I grew up in Denver, I always knew I wanted to live on the beach. And of course, there's no beach in Denver, but I would visualize the palm trees and the sand and the surf. And 20 years later, I built this incredible $8 million mansion on the beach, which was unheard of. And by the way, that the reason, use that as an example to not limit yourself when you're doing your goals, guys. Okay. But I built this $8 million mansion. I owned the beach on one side. I had my boats on the backside. It was called a Gulf to Bay. It was a slice through an island. Again, unthinkable when I was 18, but I made it happen. I manifested it. And so I worked for that for 20 years. And let me describe the house just to give you a little framework. So big waterfall, giant waterfall from the second floor balcony into the pool. You had to walk through the waterfall to get to the pool. Pool was in magazines. A big spiral staircase up to the middle of the house with this beautiful artistic wrought iron around it. Elevator, wine cellar. The second floor, I had aquariums built halfway around the spiral staircase that cost me almost $200,000. So this gives you an idea of the house, okay? So 2 months after I moved in, I'm floating in the pool at night. It's changing colors. It's got fiber optic lighting. And again, I worked for this for 20 years. So the 20 years, 2 months after I moved in, I'm looking up at this testament to my ego, which is really what it was. It was to prove the world I was good enough. And I got depressed, and I don't mean a little depressed. I mean, I got really depressed. I'm like, what the hell? How could I be depressed? I've got the Maserati. I've got a couple of Mercedes. I got the boats, the jet skis, the beautiful family. How could I possibly be depressed? And there's a good message in this. Well, several things were going on. One was you should never achieve a big goal without having other goals lined up behind it, right? Like the good book says, without a vision, the people perish. You need a vision for the future. So that's number one. Number two is, it's never about the goals. You need them to stay focused and especially in what's coming and to get that burning desire going, but it's never about that. It's happiness comes from progress and growth. Okay. Super important to remember that. But the big thing was I was totally focused on me. Rod, show the world I'm good enough. Show the world I matter, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's the year I went and saw Tony Robbins. Okay. Cause I went and bought some books and I had got to get my mojo back. I mean, this is crazy. I'm depressed. What's going on? So one of them was his, and I went and saw him live. And, and by the way, if you have an opportunity to see him, just do it. He won't speak forever. It's, I spent 20 years following him around after that. I was so impressed with his content. But I found out that he fed families for the holidays. And I'm like, what a concept. Do something for someone else. I'm embarrassed to say I had to be 40 to get that memo. But I went home and I called my brother and I said, bro, let's feed 5 families in Denver. I was flying to Denver to see him because I was already living in Florida at the time. And so he called his church, found 5 families that really needed help. The third family literally changed my life. We go up to this house and there's this woman there with 5 kids in a 1-bedroom shack. It was terrible. And she comes out and she sees all this food and toys and frozen turkey and all the stuff on the porch, and she starts crying. And her kids come out. 2 of the older ones start crying. And I start crying, and I was hooked. And I'm blessed to say in the last 23 years, we fed over 130, somewhere between 130 and 140,000 children here in Sarasota and Manatee County in Florida. We've done tens of thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies. We've done tens of thousands of teddy bears to give to local police officers for their officers to hold in their cars. So if they encounter a child that's been traumatized, they can comfort that child. And I don't say this to brag, but I know you've got listeners that have blood dripping from their teeth. They want this success so freaking bad. I'm here to tell you, if you want success, give back, okay? And see, we've been taught to achieve to be happy. Like, we can't be happy until we've achieved. But if you are giving back, it's a play on words. You're happily achieving. And Tony Robbins calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Achievement's a science. You want to learn multifamily? Come see me. I'll give you the blueprint. You just have to go do it. I'll give you the map. You just got to go do it. But if you want to be fulfilled, you got to find something that juices you. For me, it's kids. Maybe for you, it's the elderly, the environment, animals, whatever it is, and do something right now to give back to that. And I'm going to tell you, the money will come faster. That's just how the God or the world, whatever you believe, works. That's just how it works. But you don't do it for that reason. But and then you'll be fulfilled. You'll be happily achieving.
Well, Rod, gosh, this is a really cool story. Your journey is really incredible.
Thank you.
But based on what you know today, if you were to go back and talk to your younger self, getting into real estate, what would your advice be?
That's an easy one. That's an easy one. Of course, I wouldn't have screwed around with single family at all. I'd be on the back of a 300-foot yacht because I would have just done apartment buildings. Okay, so that's an easy one, and that's the question I ask a lot of my audience, a lot of my guests on my show as well, because I know the answer is always going to be go bigger, faster. It always is every time with my audience. You know, people that own thousands and tens of thousands of units. But good question. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, this has been a treat for us today. I know our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of it. We'll have your contact info in the show notes, along with the links to your website and your podcast. Mm-hmm. And I just want to say thank you. This has been a real treat.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Rod.
Kind of you to say. It's a pleasure to meet you guys. Thanks.
Thank you, Rod. Appreciate it, man.
This podcast is produced by Marissa Frost. Visit kwnwr.com to access the show notes from today's episode. Head over to Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe to The Real Look. And don't forget to leave us a review. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with a breakdown of all things real estate.